This video is sponsored by Describe. Welcome to part 2 of this 3-part series where I provide a quick pitch to better onboard you into Critical Role, so you can know where you might like to start watching. In today's video, we're going to talk about the second campaign, which ran for a total of 141 episodes, a campaign called the Mighty Nein. Also, I wanted to wear my D&D Pride shirt today, but I cannot find it for the life of me, so we're going with Baby Yoda today. Just know, I should be wearing a D&D Pride shirt because there are a lot of LGBTQ themes in this campaign. This campaign is set on the continent of Wildemount, across the sea from Tal'Dorei, and takes place more than 20 years after the Vox Machina story ended. Wildemount is generally modeled on Germanic and Slavic culture, and is directly inspired by Matt's love of The Witcher. It's also caught in a conflict between the human empire and a nation of drow elves, with an open war on the horizon. But this campaign isn't about good and evil, it's about shades of gray, and the politics are well thought out, complex, and treacherous to navigate. Also, in Campaign 1, Matt put characters from the players' backstories in front of them so they'd be forced to confront them. But in this campaign, the story's direction is determined almost entirely by the players. And when one of their backstories comes into play, it's almost always because they had to seek it out themselves in order to deal with it, or to deal with some larger issue. But they're the ones initiating the timeline and the order of the events in this campaign, for the most part. Hi folks, it's Future Mike, and I am here to talk to you about Describe, the sponsor for today's episode. Now, normally, Describe spots are read by Arctivus Gleam as he discusses an element of D&D history. But he hasn't been returning my calls, and I can't find my checkbook, so that's probably fine. So instead, I will talk to you about Describe. They are a terrific team of writers who create descriptions of monsters, or magic items, or NPCs, or locations, or scenes, or events that you can just drop directly into your campaign. And these are not just for the Dungeon Master, anybody at a D&D table can do this. For example, one of the really cool things that Liam does as Caleb Widogast is he describes the casting of his spells in cool, intricate ways. And some of you might want to do that, but feel kind of daunted by that, not feel like you're able to come up with those same sorts of descriptions. Well, you don't have to. You can go to Describe and find really cool descriptions for casting certain spells. And if you have a specific spell that is not on the website, you can request it from the scribes at Describe. Visit describe.com/supergeek and use the code SUPERGEEK at checkout to save 10% off of your first subscription payment. That's dscryb.com/supergeek. Thank you again so much to Describe for sponsoring this video. Now back to Past Mike. As I said in my previous video, the characters of Vox Machina were clear archetypes, and the stories were based on well-worn fantasy tropes. And to be clear, there's nothing at all wrong with that. I love Campaign 1, and honestly, I love well-worn fantasy tropes. But after the marvelous stories they were able to tell in Campaign 1, they now knew what they were capable of. So the characters aren't designed around clear archetypes and tropes, instead they're much better developed right away, with a lot more nuance presented early on. Travis plays Ford, a half-orc warlock with a Texas drawl who survived a shipwreck and is now trying to understand his new arrangement with an unknowable creature from beneath the sea. Marisha plays Bo, a disaster lesbian human monk and part of an organization of librarians/peacekeepers. Sam plays Not the Brave, a skittish goblin rogue. She's also an alcoholic and, of course, has a tragic backstory. Laura plays Jester, a bubbly tiefling cleric to a new god nobody has heard of, the Traveler, who encourages pranks and mischief. Liam plays Caleb Widogast, a withdrawn and antisocial human wizard with a complex relationship with fire. He's also a Liam O'Brien character, so you know he's got that tragic backstory. Ashley plays Yasha, an Aasimar barbarian from Xhorhas, which is the dark elf nation that the human empire is about to go to war with. Unlike Pike, Yasha was actually developed around the fact that Ashley would have to dip in and out of the game due to her work on Blindspot. Because of this, Yasha is a follower of the god of storms, and sometimes goes off on her own missions or pilgrimages on his behalf. Taliesin plays Mollymock Tealeaf, a colorful tiefling blood hunter who has a passion for fun and debauchery and no patience for BS. Now, without getting into specific spoilers, but a slight, vague spoiler here, there's one more character who is introduced later when one of the main characters dies. And that character is... they're just the best. I won't tell you who plays that character or when the character is introduced, but I'm going to give you a very brief description. Now, if you've heard enough and you don't want this spoiled, you can skip ahead. Caduceus Clay is a Furbolg cleric of nature, and he's a perfect calming influence on the group, a voice of reason they were desperately lacking. After playing in a few practice games in pairs, the stream starts with the party at level 2. So now that you know the characters, let's get into the story arcs. Arc 1, Come Together. Even more so than with Campaign 1, a lot of the story arcs for Campaign 2 are loose descriptions, and a few could easily be broken down into smaller arcs. But again, I'm going to use the titles and episode ranges from the Campaign 2 wrap-up episode, so these are the most official descriptions of these arcs. When the first campaign started with a one-shot for Liam's birthday, they really didn't worry about how the characters knew each other. Matt hand-waved it away, "You've been working together for a while." But by the time they reached Campaign 2, they knew the kind of storytelling they were now capable of, and that they enjoyed. They'd also seen how other characters' backstories were integrated into the campaign, and everybody wanted more of that juice. So we got 7 characters with a lot of nuance and depth and complex storytelling right out of the gate. And a consequence of that is that these characters are very slow to trust each other. Not all of them. Nott and Caleb have a strong bond, Molly and Yasha have a history, and Jester trusts everybody. But there's a strong sense hovering over this arc that there isn't a ton keeping the group together beyond convenience. Additionally, this is a very self-directed campaign overall, and so this first arc is about taking odd jobs from whoever's hiring mercenaries like them. But Matt didn't just give them a few job postings to choose from, although that does happen. He also put them in a position to choose how involved they wanted to be in the ongoing war, which shapes a lot of the campaign going forward. And this question presents itself in several ways over multiple sessions, because war is complex and there are a lot of factions at play. There's a lot to like in this arc, including some exciting adventures and some wonderful role-playing. But it also involves a lot of caginess and mistrust between the characters. And it's dynamic and interesting, to be sure. But speaking personally, as someone whose favorite Campaign 1 arc was the Chroma Conclave, I felt what this group really needed was a shot in the arm to propel them toward a singular goal. And then, that's what they got. Arc 2. The Bad Guys. This arc starts when Matt has to write out a few cast members temporarily due to job commitments and personal life developments, so he introduces a major antagonist to help with that. And very quickly, some events play out in the game that give the group exactly what they need in order to unify and trust each other. After that adventure is dealt with, the party finally has some inertia and they journey south, out of the Empire, to the coastal city of Nicodranus. This is where Jester and Ford first met before the campaign, and it's Jester's hometown, but they're also tracking down information on a magic item they found. Things spiral out of hand extremely quickly, and the party winds up in an adventure on the high seas, negotiating with pirates and exploring ancient ruins guarded by snake men. It's an excellent arc and a total tonal shift in the campaign, but as it turns out, they couldn't avoid the war forever. Arc 3. The Bright Queen's Favor. A major character from Nott's backstory winds up impacted by the war, in, again, ways that I will not say. And this leads the party to cross enemy lines into Jorhas. Here we get an entire country and culture of monstrous creatures like dark elves, goblins, and minotaurs. The characters wind up deeply entrenched in the politics of the Kryn dynasty, and form an unlikely friendship with a drow mage named Essek. They investigate some cult activity in the area, and this leads to another pivot point as a major villain shows up. A villain with some serious ties to one of the party members' backstories. Arc 4. Swords and Angels. This is probably when the campaign gets into full swing for me. I like the stuff that came before, but there were some lulls where the listlessness of the group would just get to me personally. From this point on, the Mighty Nein always has something on their plates, and that inertia helps propel the rest of the campaign in some form or another. In this arc, the Mighty Nein is racing against a ticking clock as the villain is trying to perform some deeply evil rituals and, do some cult stuff. Ford's relationship with his warlock patron comes to a head as he has to forge a new path going forward. This is also the beginning of the Mighty Nein getting involved in the politics of the Empire, and potentially forging new alliances. This also means Caleb's backstory continues to be a bigger part of the story, as some figures from his past loom large in the political climate of the Dwendalian Empire. But the members of the Mighty Nein still have some personal demons to resolve. Arc 5. Family Ties. This arc dives heavily into the personal missions and/or backstories of Bo, Nott, Ford, Caduceus, and Jester. It also features Laura Bailey performing one of the single best moves in any D&D game. You will know it when you see it. This arc doesn't seem like a lot of time. It's pretty short compared to most of the others, but a lot of adventures are covered in these 20 episodes. We're also in high-level D&D, so the party can start bouncing around the continent a lot more easily, which keeps the story moving quickly. This is also the story arc they're in the middle of when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, but they handled it shockingly well and shot pre-taped, high-quality, socially distanced episodes for the rest of the campaign. After wrapping up some personal business, the party is offered a job, which turns out to segue directly into the final arc of the campaign. Arc 6. Weird Magic. The party is recruited for an expedition to some frozen ruins dating back to the Calamity, an apocalyptic disaster from hundreds of years earlier. But this mission also connects to some loose ends from several arcs earlier, and those loose threads have culminated with a complex antagonist who has a plan to do some crazy magic and, completely overturn the world. The party must stop him while also dodging other old enemies and maintaining their most important alliances and friendships. The campaign ends with the longest episode to date at 7 hours and 2 minutes. The story wraps up with the party at level 16. And yes, once again, Liam O'Brien made me cry in the final episode of the campaign. He's very good at that. The next time we saw the Mighty Nein was in a semi-canonical, but mostly just for fun, battle royale against Vox Machina. But then we got a 2-part special called The Mighty Nein Reunited, because there was, in fact, one major lingering thread from the campaign that couldn't be ignored, and the party has to deal with it. That literally just aired less than a month ago, so I'm for sure not going to say anything more about it here. Anyway, after the Mighty Nein story ended, we got a special 8-part miniseries called Exandria Unlimited, featuring some core cast members paired with some guest stars and run by Abria Iyengar. And then Campaign 3 started shortly afterward. But we're going to talk about both of those tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Tomorrow we'll have the 3rd and final installment of this series. If you want to support the channel, there are a few ways you can do that. You can subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about new videos as soon as they come out. Usually, that's just on Mondays and Thursdays, but it's nice to get notified when I drop bonus videos like this one. You can support me on Patreon. Every patron really helps the channel, even if you can only support at $1 a month. It genuinely does make a difference. But also, I've got some cool stuff at higher levels, so check those out, see what you might like. You can join my Discord community to hang out with other people who are just getting into Critical Role, as well as people who are longtime fans and can answer questions in a bit more detail than I can get into in these videos. And you can sign up for my newsletter to get occasional updates about what I've got going on. If you missed the first video in this series, make sure to check it out here. Until next time, play fair and have fun.